Okay, 9-0. Asia, well done. Rhonda, I hope my wife doesn't come back to me later and say she's still spouting bullshit about aspartame spiking insulin. Hey team, Mike here at After 40 Fitness and after40fitness.ca. Oh, I got a doozy for you today. I'm going to go on a rant here. It's going to take me probably 15 minutes. I know it. I got a lot to cover. But if you are at all interested in the cephalic insulin response to aspartame, to sucralose, to any artificial sweetener, oh my God, you are going to want to carve out the next 15 or 20 minutes and dedicate it to this video. Man, if there's something that isn't driving me nuts, some dogma and some rhetoric right now in the social media groups and forums, it's this cephalic insulin response. It just gets thrown around willy-nilly, total fear-mongering, and total disregard for the science. Oh my God, have I got something to show you. On that note though, if this is your first time to my channel or you haven't yet, please do subscribe. Punch that like button, that helps. Somehow that helps the algorithm put this video in front of more people. On that note, I'm going to show you really quickly the thread that got forwarded to me. My wife is in a couple of intermittent fasting forums, and I got to show you this discussion. When she forwarded it to me, I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. I was like, man, there's a whole lot of morons right now spouting bullshit. And by the way, you're going to have to put up with that. I get fired up, and when I do, I say a lot of shit. So let me show you this. Here's image number one. So there's a woman in social media who I have a ton of respect for. Her name is Asia. I think I'm saying that right, Asia. So the discussion in this one was around having a Diet Coke or something. I can't remember what the incident was, but somebody said, can I have a sugar-free Monster while I'm fasting? And of course, 99% of the answers were no. And Asia jumps in and says, well, yeah, of course you can. It's zero carb, it's zero calorie. That's the definition of keto friendly and fasting friendly. Zero carb, zero calorie. And of course, people went on this, yeah, but it could spike insulin. And to Asia's credit, she's like, based on what science, right? Of course, and by the way, and so what people like to do is they like to throw out names. Well, according to Dr. Fung, according to Dr. Berg, according to Thomas Stillhauer, according to this woman named Jin. Okay, we're going to get to her in just a second. So notice here that she's actually responded first to this woman named Shelley, and she says, Jin makes that sound so matter-of-fact. That's not how science suggests it happens. It appears not to be just taste, but rather calories, which is why every test on sucrose, which is sugar, table sugar, shows a cephalic response. Now, by the way, I want to stop real quick. If you're not used to that phrase, cephalic, that refers to the mind-gut connection. Cephalic meaning mind-driven. So we're talking something here called the cephalic insulin response. It sometimes goes by the acronym CIR, cephalic insulin response, sometimes the CPIR, which is cephalic phase insulin response. And what that means is people are hypothesizing here that if you taste something sweet, if something sweet, no matter calories or not, if it touches your tongue, then your pancreas is going to go ahead and start secreting insulin in anticipation of food, in anticipation of calories. Which is why every test on sucrose shows a cephalic response, but not one ever, notice how she emphasized that, not one ever shows a response to aspartame. Cool, right? Now Rhonda jumps in. Now Rhonda, by the way, you're going to see in a minute, Rhonda runs this group. She opened this forum, this page for women. I think it's like 100,000 women are on this social media page talking about different types of intermittent fasting. So this woman is, dare I say, an influencer, right? She's got a lot of people believing her. Confirmation bias is when you believe something, and you believe it so strongly that you disregard any evidence to the contrary and cherry pick information that suits your bias. Unbelievable. Okay, I'm going to show you how Rhonda does that. Rhonda now says, this topic has been debated for years. It comes down to this. If anything, notice the emphasis that she puts, if anything tastes sweet, it's going to invoke an insulin response no matter what it is. Toothpaste is okay because you're not swallowing it. Well, hold on. The cephalic response says you don't have to swallow it. It just has to touch your taste, touch your taste buds, touch your tongue, touch your palate, okay, to elicit this response. So what she's saying right here, I don't get it. Toothpaste is okay because you're not swallowing it, and any response, any response is going to quickly go down. Well, that is the cephalic insulin response. It goes down very quick. All right, she says, we already know that both calories and taste show a cephalic response. It's best to err on the side of caution. So, again, I was just going to show what Asia says next. So Asia counters with, did you notice your terminology? Debated for years, correct. So debated meaning it's controversial. It's not rocket science here. We're not talking about a law of thermodynamics. We're not talking about something that's universal. However, she then turns around, and I love how Asia catches this and says, But if anything tastes sweet, it's gonna invoke, direct quote from Rhonda. Well, that's incorrect. That's incorrect. So she just went on one hand and said, yes, it's debated because it's not provable, but if anything tastes sweet, it's good. Anyway, carrying on, I'll use aspartame again as my get out of jail free card. Not one study ever on the cephalic response in aspartame shows an insulinic response. It's 200 times the sweetness of sugar, never a response. How do you explain that? As for sucralose, no response in anyone healthy. And only about 40% of the unhealthy, obese, pre-diabetic followers of a SAD had a response. I've covered this in a previous video where I did a rebuttal against Dr. Barry, who used the same study. The same study, followers of a SAD, obese, pre-diabetic with insulin resistance, and yet of them, only 40% had a response. More than 60% didn't. How come no one talks about that? How come no one talks about the 60% of this obese followers of a SAD group, the most compromised on the planet, and 60% didn't have a response? We'll continue to agree to disagree if you're going to take information like that and still say it's going to invoke an insulin response. Simply because science doesn't support that premise. Well said, well said. If you insist on arguing contrary to science, so be it. Just don't be surprised when I continue to argue in line with science. Fair enough? That's a spanking. Rhonda, you just got spanked. How did Rhonda respond? Just because no one has ever done a study on it doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It just means that no one has done a study on it. There's been many, and I'm going to show you how many there are. But nonetheless, so she counters with, it's because no study's been done. Well, if there's been no study done on it, stop talking about it, right? My argument to that would be, Rhonda, if there's no study done proving an insulin response, why are you talking about it? Stupid. That's stupid, right? Anyway, look at what she does next. I want to talk, just remember as I tell you about her little n=1, I want you to remember that she makes a huge mistake here, so I'm going to correct. But I also want you to get that an n=1 means not clinical, not a lab environment. There's no way to prove causation. At best, Rhonda's about to use something called correlation to try to convince you and convince Asia that there's causation. Notice what she says here. What cinched it for me, was a couple years ago I was dirty fasting. Oh, I damn well hate that term, dirty fasting. So she used some sweetener in her coffee and calls it dirty fasting. I call that flexible, but anyway, I digress. I used sweet and low in my green tea and fasting was so hard. I was always hungry. I decided to try clean fasting and had my tea plain. What a big difference. Obviously, the sweet and low, which is aspartame, was a big trigger for me since that was the only thing I changed. I don't need a study to tell me what I experienced it myself, which is why I always say it's up to the person. Well, obviously, it's up to the person to decide. No one's coming to your house and twisting your arm. But if I was new to IF, intermittent fasting, and someone told me that it was okay to use aspartame while fasting, and I found myself constantly hungry to the point where I kept eating outside my window, chances are I would quit IF immediately, which is why I said it's best to err on the side of caution. I don't have to prove myself right or wrong. Each person can do that themselves. Let's take a quick second and have a look. So a couple of things. First of all, this is an n=1 where she's talking now about hunger. So that's a completely different topic. Right? I don't know about you, but there are certain things that trigger me. I'll give you an example. Allulose and xylitol to me make me hungry. I do. For some reason, my wife, when she bakes with xylitol or allulose, I'm craving later. I'm going to have 2 or 3. If she makes fat bombs with allulose, guess what? I'm having 6 by the end of the evening. Right? However, that's hunger. That's a hunger. I don't know what that is. I don't know what drives it. But that's a different topic than the cephalic insulin response, isn't it? All of a sudden, the gauge changed. All of a sudden, this is called, I'm going to use another phrase. If you haven't heard the term straw man argument, Rhonda now is about to use or is using a straw man argument on Asia. She is saying, well, because I had hunger, I'm now going to argue against aspartame because of this, even though I'm not talking about the cephalic insulin response anymore, I'm talking about hunger. Right? Completely different topic. Isn't that interesting? I'm going to change the topic and I'm going to argue that other one just to mess with your head. All right. However, sweet and low. Let's switch real quick, and I'm going to show you something about sweet and low. And notice what it says. Sweet and low sugar substitute introduced in the United States 50 years ago and is available in more than 60 countries. What is saccharin? Saccharin is the sweetener in sweet and low. Rhonda, God damn, get your information right, girl. Like, holy shit, which is aspartame. So now, not only are we talking about a different barometer, we're talking about hunger instead of the cephalic insulin response, but now she's using an argument about saccharin. I'll get to the saccharin in a second because, believe it or not, saccharin is the one sweetener that does have a cephalic response. Proven. Can't argue it. I'm going to show you the science on it in a minute. You're going to be blown away. Saccharin does indeed have a cephalic response. and almost universally in every test. So no argument for me. However, luckily, nobody uses saccharin anymore. The only place where saccharin still exists today in commercial sales is with the packets sweet and low. Well, don't use them then. How stupid. Thank God Rhonda got it right, even though it's saccharin, Rhonda, and not aspartame. But, oh my God, don't use that one. Use equal, which equal, by the way, is aspartame. Won't have the same effect. God bless. All right, so good. So then she says, if I was new to IF and someone told me it was okay to use aspartame while fasting and I found myself constantly hungry, well, guess what? If you find yourself constantly hungry after drinking a Diet Coke, don't drink the damn Diet Coke. It's not rocket science, but stop. We're talking about the cephalic insulin response. All right, let's stick to our guns here. Let's stick to the argument, Rhonda. Now, again, let's refer back to see what Asia says next. She says plenty of studies have been done on it. Google aspartame CPIR and look at any of the first few links. All will be studies that show no CPR from aspartame. None, nada, nix, not in any participants. If you want to use hunger, here's where she catches it. She catches the straw man. She says, if you want to use hunger as your gauge, do that. At least that I can't argue, since that is truly subjective and individual. But a cephalic response, stop it already. So good. So good. Asia, I don't know who you are. Props, man. That was brilliant. So good. She caught the straw man and said, that's a different gauge. Right? That's not CPIR. Okay. Well, so you know what we should do real quick? Let's do this. Let's do what Asia described, and let's Google together, you and me, aspartame CPIR, and let's see what comes up. We'll have a little contest, Asia versus Rhonda, to see what happens. Oh, I'm so excited to do this, I can't tell you. By the way, I got to mention my setup. I'm looking at a screen over here where I've got Chrome. So while my camera's in front of me, the screen's here, so don't be surprised when I look over. All right, so as you can see on the screen here, all I did was a quick little exact what Asia recommended, aspartame CPIR. I did not put in any qualifiers. I didn't say, does aspartame, yes or no. I didn't try to spike the results. Aspartame CPIR, let's see what we get. All right, so number one is a PubMed, so it's a study. You can see this study was actually done by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. The title of Cephalic Phase Responses to Sweet Taste. And what I'm going to do is just cut to the chase, Control F, aspartame, since that really is the crux of this discussion. Look at this. At lunchtime, 12 men, normal weighted men. And by the way, they do that to rule out hormonal balances, ladies, in case you're wondering why most studies unless they're particularly done on women, like to use men. It's to remove any hormonal fluctuations. They sucked on sucralose, aspartame, and unsweetened polydextrose tab. And then after the three were administered, they took blood constantly. I'm going to jump right down to this line here. No CPIR and no significant effect on plasma glucagon or fatty acid concentrations were observed after the three stimuli. No effect on plasma glucagon and no CPIR. Oh, 1-0 Asia. I love it. Let's move on. Study number one. She was right. I like that. First one. Number two is also an NCBI, so it's also a study. Let's have a look at number two. This study was published by the journal Physiology Behavior in 2017. The title is A Cephalic Phase Insulin Response to Nutritive and Low-Calorie Sweeteners in Solid and Beverage Form. I'm going to use this one again down the road when it comes to sucralose. But again, let's for now, for the sake of this article or this discussion, let's search again for aspartame. I want you to note it's been documented for some low-cal sweeteners. They're talking about CPIR. There's controversy over the sensation of sweetness alone is enough for CPIR. It's been documented for some low-cal sweeteners such as saccharin, Rhonda, but not sucralose, aspartame, stevioside, which is stevia, ACE-K, or cyclamate. I don't even know what cyclamate is, but anyway. But not aspartame. Let's see if there's any other mention. I'll keep on trucking down and see if there's any other mention of aspartame. Aspartame is one low-calorie sweetener that has not been associated with a CPIR or biphasic response in humans. Good. Already, you can tell based on this link, we're already at 2-0 for Asia. Let's go to number three. This one is not a study. This one is a journal. Not so sweet insulin. But let's have a look at it. Let's have a quick three. Not so sweet insulin effects of artificial sweeteners. Let's just see what it says. It's a journal. It's an article. It's not a study. So we're going to take this with a grain of salt if it says anything to the contrary. But let's go ahead. Aspartame. Let's find you. Something called CPIR. Oh, this should be good. Okay, here's someone giving their opinion, I think. Third of my favorites. Some sweeteners elicit an insulin response. It's known as the cephalic phase insulin response. There are countless sweeteners, but the main ones may, I like that, may, there's your get out of jail free card right there in case you're wondering. Just use the word may or can or could or possibly. Stupid. Including aspartame and saccharin. Well, we know about saccharin. But aspartame, by the way, this study, I do remember looking at this one, and it did say, again, it was postprandial. It was with food. It was prandial. In a slight twist, one interesting study explored the effects of various sweeteners on altering insulin release from a meal. That's what we're talking about. Drinking sucrose with a meal. This one is a wash. I'm not going to look at this one too much because it's not a study and it doesn't refer to breaking a fast or insulin response. So that was Insulin IQ. ResearchGate. Let's have a look at this one. ResearchGate typically reports on studies. We'll see what this one is. This is indeed a study. This is an article, Cephalic Phase Insulin Release in Healthy Humans After Taste Stimulation. It was reported on June 2008 in the journal Appetite. What they did in the study, though, when I do a search for aspartame, you can see that nothing comes up except down here in the comments. However, in the snippet itself, the abstract, what they do point out is that the aim of the study was to examine the effects of different solutions on CPIR. Under fasting conditions, healthy human subjects sipped and washed their mouths out with 8 taste solutions. Notice the 8: sucrose, saccharin, acetic acid, sodium chloride, quinine, distilled water, starch, and sodium glutamate. 45 seconds again, and again, that's not natural. I wish they didn't do that. But nonetheless, it is what it is. We can agree to disagree. They were not swallowed. They were then applied in randomized ordered. Notice a significant increase of plasma insulin concentration was apparent after stimulation with sucrose and saccharin. In conclusion, the current data suggests that the sweeteners sucrose and saccharin activate a CPIR, even when only tasted. All right, so we knew that, right? But did you notice 2 out of 8? 8 solutions, 2 out of 8 had a response. Well, how come we don't talk about that? How come we don't say, oh my God, look at that, 75% of tastes don't elicit a CPIR? You know what we end up doing, a la Rhonda, is we end up looking at the fact that 2 out of 8 did, 2 out of 8, 25%, and then all of a sudden we put the word anything in capitals. How ridiculous. Triggered. Okay, let's move on before I lose my shit. Next one down is pages.ucsd.edu. Well, this is a university, but let's have a quick look and see what it has to say. Also in the journal Appetite, okay, so this university, whoever it is reporting on the cephalic phase. Again, I'm going to go right to aspartame. Let's do a search. Oh, this is good. This actually quotes a couple of studies. In the intro, they refer to CPIR, can it be elicited by application of taste solutions, especially sweetness? This study right here in 1987, one study compared the effect of different stimuli: sucrose, saccharin, water, aspartame, and apple pie. Love it. On plasma insulin and glucose within the same individuals using sip and spit. All stimuli except for apple pie did not provide sufficient stimulation for CPIR. So that'd be a bit of a lesson. In this example, nothing produced a CPIR, nothing spiked insulin whatsoever except for solid food calories. Solid food, chewing, right? Do you know that term masticating means chewing? So that appears to be a contributor. Isn't that interesting? The second study down here, presented by Abdallah, Shabert, and Louis Sylvester, 1997, investigated the effect of oral sensation of nutritive and non-nutritive sweetened tablets after consumption of a carbohydrate-free breakfast. So carbohydrate-free, I guess that just means protein and fat. Probably bacon and eggs or something like that. The study revealed that 5-minute suction of sucrose, aspartame, and unsweetened polydextrose tabs did not induce CPIR. So there we've got 2 in a row, which means I think we go from 2-0 for Asia to 4-0 for Asia. This was a good find. I'm glad we did this one. All right. I wasn't sure about it being an EDU, but thank God we did. Next one down is academic.oup.com. I can see by the title, Abdallah, Shabert, and Louis Sylvester, this is a repeat. This is the same one we just looked at, so we're going to bypass that one and move on in the sake of time. I'll move on to caloriecontrol.org. This sounds to me like it might be a journal or an article. Myth versus reality. This is good. Myth or fact, metabolic syndrome. The myth: low-calorie sweeteners, such as aspartame, promote metabolic syndrome, glucose intolerance, and risk of diabetes. That's myth. Fact: aspartame has no effect on blood sugar levels. We're looking for insulin here, aren't we? We know that it's got no calories. It's 0 calorie, which is why it's approved for diabetes, right? Declared safe for diabetics because there is no calories in aspartame. I am just going to do a quick search on insulin. Let's switch to insulin here and see if there's any mention. Who knows? Gibson in the et al. Nutrition Bulletin 2014. Low-calorie sweeteners may have a beneficial impact on postprandial glucose and insulin in healthy individuals and people with diabetes. The weight of existing evidence is that aspartame is safe at current levels. This is another study from Magnuson et al. From 2007. Is safe at current levels of consumption as a non-nutritive sweetener. Aspartame does not affect glycemic response in normal or diabetic individuals and does not affect metabolic control or insulin release. Looks good to me. Is that 5-0 Asia? What about this last one here, the mention of insulin? Oh, here we go. Renwick and Molinari from 2010 to explore the interactions between sweeteners and enteroendocrine cells, consequences for glucose absorption and insulin release. And the conclusion observed from the study was that data from numerous publications on the effects of low-energy sweeteners on appetite, insulin, and glucose levels show that there is little consistent evidence that low-energy sweeteners increase appetite or subsequent food intake, cause insulin release, or affect blood pressure in normal individuals. I'm losing count. Is it 6 now? Is that 5 or 6? I'll be safe and say it's 5-0 for Asia. All right. That was academic. That was calorie control. Unbound medicine, PubMed. Let's have a look at this one. Oh, I already saw in the description it said aspartame polydextrose. So this was 12 men sucked for 5 minutes on aspartame polydextrose. Yes, we did this one. All right. American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. This was the Abdallah study from 1997. We'll bypass that. 5-0, right? Am I right? Science, let's have a quick look here. Aspartame sweetened beverage. Let's have a look at this one from Science Direct. 5-0 Asia. Whew, that's compelling. Sweet taste. Awesome. I like it. In the journal Physiology and Behavior, this study was on the effect of cephalic phase insulin release in men. Let's go right back to aspartame. Oh, this is a repeat. The 5th condition involved modified apple pie, which we learned. The results suggest that nutritive, non-nutritive sweeteners and solutions are not adequate stimuli for... All right, we repeat that one. So no change. Still 5-0. Science Direct, Mark's I was afraid that would show up on the first page. All right, I'm going to show this to you. Dr. Mark Sisson. Mark is a naturopath, homeopathic doctor. He's very much a naturalist, and I promise you right now, he will be, if Rhonda's going to get one, right? Where are we at? 5-0? Is it 5-0? Rhonda may just get one here because Mark sometimes has an agenda. He's very anti-artificial anything, so I'll be surprised if anything he has to say here is decent. All right, so this may count against me. Does aspartame, aka equal or NutraSweet, right, Rhonda, affect insulin? Insulin is pretty gross stuff. I knew it was going to start that way. Good. That's not what we're interested in today. Luckily, there's a good amount of research explaining what, if any, effect aspartame has on insulin secretion. One study, good, he's going to refer to studies. Oh, this may work out well for me. One study found that protein produced a significant insulin. Well, yes, protein has to. One of the good effects of insulin, just so you know, it's very anabolic, and it partitions amino acids out of our bloodstream and into muscle for muscle growth, for muscle protein synthesis. So, thank you, it needs to. While aspartame had no effect on insulin levels. 6-0 Asia. Another study found that aspartame had no effect on the insulin response in humans, whether alone or when combined with carbs. I believe that may refer back to that breakfast one we looked at, so we'll just stay at 6-0 for Asia. I'm not sure about that one. Another earlier study examined the effects of aspartame on prolactin, cortisol, growth hormone, insulin, and blood glucose levels and found it had none. Oh, look at this line. The authors used the same amount of aspartame you'd find in a standard artificially sweetened drink, but were unable to record any significant hormonal alterations. Okay, that's 7-0 for Asia right there. But this is key. Standard artificially sweetened drink. I'm going to digress real quick and tell you why that's key. Have you ever heard the phrase or the terminology that sucralose has a negative impact on our gut biome? That's based on a study on Worcester rats. And what they did was they fed these rats so much sucralose. In fact, I'll tell you how much. They did it by milligram per kilogram, right? So the equivalent. Well, when I did the math on my weight at 85 kilograms, that was the equivalent. What they fed those rats was the equivalent of me having to ingest 36 sugar-free monsters a day, every day, for 90 days. Let that sink in, okay? 36 sugar-free monsters a day, every day, for 90 days. And sure enough, when they autopsied those rats, 50% of their gut biome was destroyed. No shit, Sherlock. I mean, oh my God, I don't even know how much that is in ounces. I mean, just think about 36 8-ounce glasses of water a day. I don't know when water becomes toxic, but I got to assume at 36 8-ounce glasses a day, you're getting damn close. Right? But does that get talked about when they talk about how sucralose affects the gut biome? Do they mention that, by the way, they just unbelievable amount of sucralose was pumped into these rats, equivalent to their body weight? Like, it's ridiculous. So when I find out that they use this standard, let's call it a Diet Coke, which by the way has like 50 milligrams, 1/20th of a gram. How could that have any impact on our body? Okay, it has to be some stupid amount. So I'm glad they were able to use to show that it's a standard amount and yet produce no impact. And then a study of 48 healthy volunteers found no evidence, 48, that's a good study size, found no evidence that aspartame has any effect on insulin levels. I think it's 9-0, 8 or 9, something like that. Anyway, that was the entire first page per Asia's recommendation. That's it. That's the whole first page. Okay, 9-0. Asia, well done. Rhonda, I hope my wife doesn't come back to me later and say she's still spouting bullshit about aspartame spiking insulin. You can tell that took much longer than I expected to get through that whole mess of science and studies. What we'll do then is we'll call this stage 1, phase 1, part 1. And I'll come back then in part 2 with the comments on Jin Stevens and Dr. Fung and their comments about the CPIR. We'll actually look at some of Jin's work, her comments in her books and how unscientific they are. And then we'll have a good in-depth look at sucralose and if there is a CPIR effect that you and I, if we're in the keto Atkins, low carb and or intermittent fasting space, something we need to be aware of or worried about. On that note, thanks for spending your time with me. I'll see you in the next one. But if you haven't yet, please do hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to smash the like button. That helps me get this video out. And hey, feel free to share it. If anybody hits you up with a Diet Coke breaks your fast, this is a video you're going to want to share with them because after I just went through, what was that, 9 studies? It's pretty clear there is no CPIR from aspartame. See you in the next one.